I'm going to be honest with you right now. The night everything fell apart, I wasn't crying. I wasn't yelling. I was just standing in a hallway holding someone else's phone, and my hands had gone completely still. Not calm still, the kind of still that happens right before your brain fully catches up to what your eyes just read. The kind of still that means something inside you already knows, even before you're ready to know it. I remember the light in that hallway, one of those yellowy overhead bulbs that buzzes faintly if the building gets too quiet. I remember the carpet pattern under my feet, dark burgundy, worn flat in the middle from years of foot traffic. I remember thinking, completely out of nowhere, that I had never noticed that carpet before. Isn't that strange? You can walk over something 100 times and never actually see it until the moment your world stops making sense. I looked at that phone for maybe 5 seconds, maybe 10, long enough that my reflection appeared faintly in the black screen when it went dark again. And I just thought, oh, that's what this was. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Because that moment didn't happen in a vacuum. Nothing ever does. If you've ever trusted someone you really, truly shouldn't have, you probably already know how this ends. You knew before I told you. That particular feeling, the one where your gut was screaming at you for months, and you kept overruling it because it felt easier, yeah. You know, drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from. Seriously. Because I need to know. I'm not the only one who's been this spectacularly bad at listening to themselves. And if this is your first time here, welcome. Subscribe. Because clearly we're going to have a lot to talk about. Okay, so let me tell you about Jordan first. I was 21 when I moved into the Carver Street building, 4th floor, Unit 4C, which sounded significantly more impressive before I saw it in person. It was a one-bedroom with a kitchen that was essentially just a wall with a stove attached to it, and a bathroom so narrow that if you dropped your shampoo, you had to do a full yoga sequence to pick it up. But the rent was manageable on a barista's salary, and it had a window that looked out over the street, and after 2 years of living with 3 roommates in a house that always smelled like someone's wet sneakers, I needed my own walls badly. I moved in on a Saturday in October. By 8 o'clock that evening, I had assembled exactly half of a bookshelf, eaten a protein bar for dinner, and lost my keys somewhere between the moving boxes and what I was optimistically calling the living room. I remember standing in the middle of the apartment, looking at the chaos around me, feeling that specific brand of exhaustion that isn't just physical, the kind where you're tired of starting over, tired of the effort of building something small and decent from scratch again. I went down to the lobby to check if I'd left the keys at the front desk. They weren't there, and on my way back to the elevator, the doors opened and Jordan walked out carrying a pizza box and wearing a look on his face that matched exactly how I felt, like the day had been longer than it had any right to be. He almost ran into me, stepped back, said sorry, then looked up. "You just move in?" he asked. He had that easy way of talking to strangers that I always envied in people. No warmth up, no awkwardness, just immediately treating you like someone he'd known for a while. "Today," I said. "4th floor, 2 floors up from me." He looked at the pizza box. "You eat yet?" I told him I'd had a protein bar. He made a face like I'd said something genuinely offensive, which, fair. He said his name was Jordan, that he'd lived in the building 2 years, and that his own keys were inside his apartment because he'd forgotten them on his way out to get the pizza, which was, and I remember this part clearly, a pepperoni and mushroom that he'd ordered for one because he'd had what he described as a specific kind of bad week. We sat on the floor of the 4th floor hallway for an hour, because neither of us could get into our apartments. The overhead light flickered twice while we talked. I learned that he worked at a design firm downtown, that he'd grown up in Michigan, that he had a habit of laughing slightly too loud at his own jokes before they fully landed. I told him I worked at a coffee shop 3 blocks away, that I was originally from Georgia, that I'd moved up here chasing something I couldn't completely name yet, but that felt like forward. When the building super finally came to let me in, Jordan handed me the last 2 slices of pizza through the door like it was the most natural thing in the world. "Welcome to Carver Street," he said. I stood in my half-assembled apartment eating cold pizza and thinking, okay, maybe this is going to be fine. Here's what I did not think. I did not think about how he'd looked when he laughed, leaned back against the wall with his whole body in it. I did not think about the way he'd held my gaze just a second longer than strangers usually do when they're deciding whether to trust you. I was very, very good at not thinking things like that. I had been practicing for years. The next 3 years with Jordan were, honestly, they were the best friendship I'd had since I was a kid. The kind that sneaks up on you slowly and then suddenly you can't remember what you did before it. He knocked on my door when he smelled good coffee. I knocked on his when I needed to complain about a customer. We watched bad action movies on weeknights and argued about them afterward with more passion than either of us had ever felt about any actual film. He borrowed my gray hoodie once and started wearing it so often that at some point it silently became his. I never asked for it back. I told myself that was just what close friendships looked like. That the way I noticed his mood before he said anything was just because I was observant. That the way a room felt slightly more manageable when he was in it was just comfort, familiarity, the ordinary warmth of someone you trust. I got very good at telling myself that. I wasn't entirely wrong, by the way. It genuinely was all of those things. It was just also something else that I was choosing, very deliberately, not to look at directly, because Jordan was straight. He dated women, nothing serious, but he dated them, talked about them the way men who are attracted to women talk about them, naturally, offhandedly, without the slight self-consciousness I always felt when I tried to mirror that. I wasn't confused about that. I wasn't constructing some fantasy where I'd misread him. I was gay. He was straight. And I cared about him too much to let that wreck the thing we had. So I locked it down. Filed it under things that are real but don't get to matter. Kept joking. Kept showing up. Kept being the person he knocked on the door for when he needed company. And then Jordan started seeing Cassie. She was fine. She genuinely was. Warm, funny, pretty, in an easy way. I met her twice and couldn't find a single legitimate reason to dislike her, which was its own particular inconvenience. Jordan lit up around her in this unguarded way that I recognized because I'd seen him light up like that before. Just never quite aimed at her direction when I was paying attention. I watched the two of them leave the building one Friday night, his hand at the small of her back, and I stood at my window for a while after they'd gone, and I thought, okay, this is the part where you stop. Not stop being his friend. Just stop holding the door open on the other thing. Stop sitting in that particular hallway. I went back to my couch. I opened my phone. And 3 weeks later, I said yes when a man named Nate left me his number along with a 40% tip on a $12 latte. Nate was 27. He worked in project management for a tech company, which in this city meant he was stable in a way that felt almost architectural solid. Planned, like nothing could knock him off balance. He had dark hair and steady hands, and when he looked at you, he gave you his full attention in a way that felt, at first, like being seen. He was polished in all the ways I wasn't. He knew which wine to order and how to talk to waiters like they were people, and how to fill silence without it becoming awkward. Our first date lasted 4 hours without either of us noticing. He walked me back to my building and didn't push anything. Just said he'd had a good time and looked like he meant it. I texted Priya about it on the way upstairs. Priya was my oldest friend in the city. Sharp, a little blunt. The kind of person who notices the thing you're trying not to say and then says it for you with startling precision. He sounds good, she texted back. Are you excited or just relieved? I stared at that text for a second, then typed, can it be both? She sent back a single period, which with Priya meant, we'll talk about this later. I let myself into my apartment, dropped my jacket on the chair, and sat on the edge of my bed in the dark for a moment. From 2 floors below, I could hear music, Jordan's playlist, the one he always put on when he was unwinding after a long week, something low and easy. I lay back and looked at the ceiling, and told myself this was good. This was healthy. This was what moving forward looked like. 6 weeks later, I was introducing Nate to Jordan in the hallway outside my apartment. I watched them shake hands, Jordan with his usual easy smile, Nate with that particular brand of attentive politeness he wore in social situations. They talked for maybe 4 minutes. Sports, the building, something about a restaurant nearby. Normal, completely normal, except, at one point, Jordan glanced at me, not at Nate, just at me, for less than a second with an expression I couldn't fully read. Not unfriendly, not anything I could name, just something. I filed it away without labeling it. I was becoming a specialist in that particular skill. That night, Nate stayed over for the first time. In the morning, he made coffee and set a mug on the counter for me exactly the way I liked it, black. No sugar without asking. He smiled when I noticed. I thought, this is what it's supposed to feel like. 2 floors down, a playlist was still going. I turned the volume up on the TV just slightly. The first time Jordan texted me that I didn't answer wasn't intentional. It was late. Nate was there, and it just didn't feel like the right moment. I looked at it, thought I'd reply later, and then didn't. Later that week, walking past the hallway mirror on my way out, I caught my own reflection and stopped for a second. I looked fine. I looked like a person with their life in order. I almost believed it. I grabbed my jacket and headed out. Downstairs, I passed Jordan's door without knocking, which was something I hadn't done in 3 years without thinking twice about. I told myself it was nothing. I was really, genuinely, starting to believe my own material. Funhai, the thing about small changes is that they don't announce themselves. That's what nobody tells you. You expect the moment to be obvious, some scene you'll recognize as the turning point, the before and after, the line you'll be able to point to later and say, there, that's where it started going wrong. But it doesn't work like that. At least it didn't for me. For me, it was gradual in the way that erosion is gradual. You don't see the ground shifting. You just wake up one day and realize you're standing somewhere different from where you started, and you can't quite trace the steps that got you there. 2 months into dating Nate, I still thought I was standing in the same place. Looking back, I can see exactly when the first crack appeared. I just didn't call it a crack at the time. I called it something else, consideration maybe. Or communication. The language of someone who is already starting to reframe things without realizing it. It was a Thursday evening. Priya had texted asking if I wanted to grab food. The kind of casual, low-effort plan we'd had 100 times before her usual Thai place. 9 o'clock. No big deal. I was in Nate's apartment when the text came in. I mentioned it while he was cooking. The way you do, no real significance. Just filling the space. He didn't say anything right away. Just kept stirring whatever was in the pan. Quiet for a second. Then he asked, very casually, "Is that the same friend you saw last week?" I said, "Yeah." Another pause. "You guys see each other pretty often." I said we did. We'd been friends a long time. He turned the burner down slightly. "I just think it would be nice if we had Thursday nights. That's all. We've been together 2 months, and we haven't really established anything that's ours yet." I stood there holding my phone, and I want to tell you that I immediately heard the thing underneath that sentence. I want to say my gut responded correctly in real time. But the honest answer is that it didn't, because what he said sounded reasonable. It even sounded considerate, like a man who wanted to prioritize the relationship, who was thinking about us, who was paying attention in the way that I'd been starved for before. So I texted Priya and said something had come up, and I put my phone face down on the counter, and I sat down at the table that Nate had already set for 2. He smiled when I sat down. Warm, genuine, relieved in a way that I took for affection. I texted Priya back the next day and said we'd reschedule. She said sure, no worries. And I believed that and moved on. That was the first Thursday. There were others. It happened so gradually that I didn't keep count at first. A comment here. Nothing serious. Just an observation. You don't need to respond to him tonight, do you? Said about Jordan. One evening when I'd picked up my phone to reply to something. Not a demand. Just a question. I put the phone back down and told myself I'd answer later. And later became the next day. And the next day I was busy. And eventually it had been almost a week, and the conversation had faded into the general noise of everything. Here is the thing about rationalization. It gets faster with practice. The first few times you have to actually work at it, build the argument, convince yourself, but after a while your brain just does it automatically. Like a muscle that's been trained. You don't even notice you're doing it anymore. You just feel vaguely okay without quite knowing why. And you keep moving. The comment about my clothes was maybe week 10. We were getting ready to go out together, and I came out of the bathroom in the dark green shirt I'd been wearing for years, the one I liked because it was comfortable, and because Priya had once said it suited me. Nate looked at me for a moment with an expression I couldn't immediately read. "Is that what you're wearing?" I looked down at the shirt. "Yeah." "Why?" He made a small sound, not quite a laugh. It's a little worn, Eli. You could wear the blue one. You look better in the blue one." I changed into the blue one. I stood in front of the mirror buttoning it, and told myself this was nothing. He had an eye for this kind of thing. He was trying to help. We were going somewhere nice and it made sense to think about it. I wore the blue one. I don't know why that one sticks with me so specifically. Maybe because it was the first time I changed something about myself in a way I hadn't decided to change, and my only response was to look in the mirror and decide the reflection was fine. The night I finally saw Priya again was about 3 weeks after I'd canceled on her the first time. We met for coffee on a Sunday afternoon, her choice of place. A small, cluttered shop near her apartment that smelled like cardamom and old wood, and that she'd been going to for years. She was already there when I arrived, both hands around her mug, watching the door. When she saw me, she smiled, but it was the particular kind of Priya smile that didn't quite reach her eyes yet, the one that meant she was still deciding something. We talked for a while about regular things. Her job, a book she was reading, a mutual friend's very questionable recent decisions. The conversation was easy, in the way all conversations with Priya were easy. She had a way of making space for things without pushing, which was either a gift or a tactic, depending on how you were feeling that day. Then she set her mug down and looked at me. "You look tired," she said. I told her I'd been busy. Not that kind of tired. She tilted her head slightly. "You look tired in a different way. Like you've been using energy on something you're not talking about." I opened my mouth to say something reassuring. She kept going before I could. "How's Nate?" "Good. Really good." "Yeah?" She was watching me in that careful way of hers. "You seem I don't know. Smaller than usual." That word landed weird. Smaller. I wanted to push it away, but it caught on something. "I'm fine," I said. "It's new, right? The first few months are always an adjustment." Priya nodded slowly, like she was filing that answer away rather than accepting it. "Sure," she said. You haven't been around much, and when I do talk to you, you seem like you're choosing your words more carefully than you used to." I laughed, a bit too quickly. "That's not a bad thing." "No," she agreed. "It's just different." She picked her mug back up. "I'm not trying to make it into something. I just notice things." "I know," I thought. "That's always been your whole thing, Priya." She said something else that afternoon, almost offhandedly. The way she sometimes dropped the important things wrapped in other conversations so you didn't feel it coming. We were putting our coats on to leave, talking about something else entirely. And she paused and said, "People don't change overnight, Eli. They just stop hiding." I looked at her. She wasn't looking back at me, just adjusting her scarf. "I know that," I said. "I know you know it," she said. "I just like saying it out loud sometimes." We hugged outside on the sidewalk. I walked back to the subway with her words sitting somewhere in my chest in a way I couldn't quite shake. Like a stone that's too small to identify but won't stop pressing. That evening I mentioned the coffee to Nate. I told him I'd seen Priya, that it was good to catch up, that she was doing well. I kept it light, casual, the way you summarize a day. Nate listened. Then he asked, without changing his tone at all, "Does she always have opinions about your relationships?" Something moved in my chest. Very small. "Not really," I said. "She's just observant." He turned back to his laptop. "It's a lot. Having a friend who makes everything into something to analyze." I didn't respond. I just nodded in a vague way and picked up my own phone. And I sat there for a minute, not really looking at anything. And that feeling in my chest didn't leave. I just buried it the way I'd gotten good at burying things. I didn't see Jordan much in those weeks, which I told myself made sense. He was 2 floors down, but we both had lives. We both had routines now. This was just what happened when things shifted. People got busy. It was fine, but I noticed the absence. The way you notice a sound stopping. Not dramatically. Just the sudden quiet where something used to be. The few times I did see him in the hallway or the lobby, he was normal. Easy smile, brief conversation, the same light energy he always had. But something was slightly different, a timing thing. The way you can tell a song is a half step off even if you can't name the note. He didn't linger the way he used to. He'd say, "Hey," exchange a few sentences, and then there'd be a natural out, and he'd take it, and I'd let him. I told myself he was adjusting to the Cassie situation. I told myself I was adjusting to Nate. We were both just busy. Then one evening I came home from a late shift and I found him sitting on the floor of the hallway outside his apartment. Not on the phone. Not doing anything. Just sitting there with his back against the wall and his knees up, looking at nothing in particular. I almost walked past. I stopped myself. "Hey." I crouched down to his level. "You okay?" He looked up. In the yellowish hallway light, he looked more tired than I'd seen him in a long time. "Cassie and I broke up," he said. I sat down on the floor next to him. "When?" "Yesterday." "Jordan." "It's fine," he said. "It was coming for a while." He leaned his head back against the wall. I think I was doing that thing where you keep trying to make something work because it's easier than admitting it was wrong to begin with. Something in that sentence hit differently than it should have. I didn't look at him directly. "I'm sorry," I said. "Don't be." He was quiet for a moment. Then he turned his head slightly toward me. "Are you okay?" I frowned. "Me? You're the one who just—" "I know." His voice was even. "But you've been, I don't know. You've been somewhere else lately." He paused. "Are you okay? With Nate? With everything?" The question was so direct and so quiet that for a second I didn't have a ready answer, which almost never happened to me. I felt my mouth do the thing it does when my brain is stalling, start to form a word. Stop. Recalibrate. "Yeah," I said. "It's good. It's really good." Jordan held my gaze for a moment. Just a moment. Then he nodded once and looked back at the wall. "Okay," he said. Not like he believed me. Not like he didn't. Just okay. Like he was setting it down somewhere. We sat there for a few minutes without talking. The hallway was quiet. The fluorescent light above us hummed at its usual frequency. It felt for a moment, almost like before, like pizza on the floor, like comfortable silence, like the version of things that had existed before I'd started choosing so carefully what to feel and what to ignore. Then my phone buzzed. "Nate." I looked at the screen. "You home?" I stood up, brushed off my jeans, told Jordan to text me if he needed anything. And I meant it when I said it. I genuinely meant it. But I was already walking toward the elevator by the time the words finished leaving my mouth. The next time I was at Nate's apartment, I left my phone on the kitchen counter while I went to the bathroom. I was gone, maybe 3 minutes. When I came back, Nate was holding it, not doing anything dramatic with it, not hiding it or acting guilty, just holding it and scrolling with his thumb, the way you scroll when you've been doing it long enough that you've stopped feeling like you need to justify it. He looked up when he heard me and smiled. "Jordan texted you," he said. I stood in the doorway and looked at him, at the phone in his hand, at the casual, unbothered way he was holding something that was mine. "I see that," I said. He set it down on the counter. "He wants to watch something this weekend, apparently." His tone was light, neutral. "You should probably just tell him you're busy." I walked over and picked up the phone. I didn't say anything. I just held it for a second. And Nate had already turned back toward what he was doing, and the kitchen was quiet and ordinary looking. And I stood there with that stone in my chest again, heavier this time, in a different place. I put the phone in my pocket, and I didn't answer Jordan. But something had shifted behind my sternum in a way I couldn't quite explain yet. Some small gear catching on another small gear. The beginning of a machine I hadn't decided to build. I didn't say anything that night. I went home alone around midnight. And in the elevator going up, I looked at Jordan's message, 3 words. "Easy, low pressure, you, around Saturday?" And I stood there while the floors counted past, and I thought about Priya saying smaller, and I thought about Jordan on the hallway floor asking, "Are you okay?" And I thought about all the ways I had become fluent in not answering, questions that deserved an answer. I got to my floor, past Jordan's door without stopping, went inside, sat down on the edge of my bed in the dark, and stayed there for a little longer than I meant to. Saturday came and went. I never answered Jordan's text. I told myself it was fine. I told myself a lot of things that week, stacked them up neatly like I was building something load-bearing, something that would hold if I just kept adding to it. Nate and I went to dinner on Saturday. It was good. The restaurant was nice, the kind of place with cloth napkins and a wine list and soft lighting that makes everyone look like a better version of themselves. He was attentive and funny, and interested in everything I said. On the way home, he held my hand without making it into a moment, just reached over and took it, easy and natural. And I thought, see, this is real. This is what you chose. I chose it again on Sunday and Monday, and by Tuesday I had almost convinced myself that the gear-catching feeling in my chest had just been anxiety, just the ordinary noise of someone who overthinks, nothing that meant anything specific. Then Jordan showed up at my work. It was a Wednesday, 3:30 in the afternoon, that lull between the lunch rush and the after-work crowd, when the shop gets quiet enough that you can hear the espresso machine cooling. I was restocking the pastry case, half present, running through a mental list of things I needed to do that evening. The bell above the door went. I looked up out of habit. Jordan. He was wearing his work jacket, the navy one, like he'd come straight from the office. He stood just inside the door for a second, scanning the room, And when he found me, his expression shifted not to a smile exactly. Something more careful than a smile. My first thought, stupid and immediate, was that I looked tired. My second thought was that I hadn't answered his text and now here he was in person, and I had no ready version of that ready to give him. I straightened up and said, "Hey," keeping my voice at the normal register of "Hey, I see you in the hallway sometimes," rather than "Hey, I've been avoiding you for 2 weeks," which required slightly more effort than it should have. "Hey," he said back. He came to the counter. "You have a minute?" I looked around the shop. 2 customers at laptops. 1 older woman, reading a paperback. My coworker Dessa was handling the bar. I untied my apron from the front and came around to the floor side of the counter and told him to grab the corner table. We sat down. He had his hands flat on the table in front of him, not fidgeting, just placed there, like he was steadying himself. That was when I noticed how deliberately still he was being. Jordan was not a still person. Jordan filled space without trying, moved through rooms like he had a right to them, talked with his hands and laughed with his whole chest. This version of him, measured and careful and quiet, was one I didn't have a lot of experience with. "I'm going to say something," he said, "and I need you to just let me finish it before you say anything. Because if I don't get through all of it, I'm going to talk myself out of the second half." Something in my stomach went tight. "Okay," I said. He looked at the table for a moment. Then at me. "I think I've been lying to myself for a really long time." He said it slowly, feeling out each word. "About who I am, about what I want, about a lot of things." He paused, and I think some of it had to do with you. Like, specifically you. Not in a way where it's your fault, but in a way where you were always there. And it was easier to not look at it because looking at it would have meant admitting something I wasn't ready to admit. He exhaled. "I don't know exactly what I am. I'm still figuring that out. But I know I've been not looking at this for 3 years and I'm tired. I'm tired of not looking at it." The coffee shop was quiet. I could hear Dessa grinding beans at the bar. The older woman turned a page. I sat across from Jordan and felt the world do something strange in slow motion. The way it does when your brain is receiving information that it doesn't have a ready category for. Because the thing he'd just said, the shape of it, the weight of it was something I had imagined hearing in approximately 100 different versions across 3 years of careful, deliberate, not thinking. I knew what it sounded like. I had written it in my head so many times that I recognized it on contact. And my first feeling, not second, not after reflection, but first, immediate, involuntary, was panic. Not the bad kind, just pure overwhelm. The floor-moving sensation of something huge arriving at the exact wrong moment. Because I was with Nate. I had built the last 4 months around Nate. I had canceled on Priya and stopped answering Jordan and worn the blue shirt and become fluent in not saying things. And all of it had been in service of something I had decided was the right choice, the healthy choice, the forward choice. And now Jordan was sitting across from me with his hands flat on the table and his eyes completely open. And everything I had constructed was sitting in my chest, feeling suddenly, terribly fragile. "Jordan," I started. "I know," he said immediately. "I know you're with Nate. I'm not asking you to do anything. I'm not trying to make this into something you have to respond to right now. He stopped, looked away for a second. I kept almost saying it and then not saying it. For months. And I couldn't keep doing that. I needed you to know. I looked at him. At the line of his jaw, the way his shoulders were set, the particular effort of someone trying to be honest about something that cost them something to say. And something cracked open in my chest, not dramatically. Not like breaking, just like a window opening that had been sealed for a long time. I thought about the past 4 months in a new sequence. Not the version I'd been telling myself, the one about healthy choices and moving forward. The real sequence, the way I'd stopped answering his messages, the way I'd passed his door, the way I'd worn the blue shirt, the way I'd sat in Nate's kitchen and watched him scroll through my phone and said nothing. I thought, I spent 4 months running from this, and I ran directly into something I'm only now starting to understand. I didn't say any of that. I said, I need a little time to think. Jordan nodded like he'd expected that answer and had already accepted it. Yeah, he said. Take whatever you need. He stood up, picked up his jacket from the back of the chair. Then he looked at me one more time. I'm still going to be upstairs, he said. That part doesn't change. He left. I sat at the corner table for a few minutes after the door closed. Dessa called my name from the bar, and I said I was fine. 1 second. and I pressed my hands flat on the table the same way he had, like the surface could hold me level. Then I picked up my phone, and I saw already that Nate had texted me 20 minutes ago asking when my shift ended. I put the phone back down and looked out the window at the street. Nate already knew about the coffee shop by the time I got to his apartment that evening. I don't know exactly how someone had seen. Someone had mentioned it, or he'd checked something I hadn't thought to consider. It didn't matter how. What mattered was the way he was standing in the kitchen when I walked in. Very still, in a way that had nothing to do with the careful stillness Jordan had shown me earlier. This was a different kind of still, the kind that has weight in it. "How was work?" he asked. "Fine," I said. I set my bag down. "Nate, Jordan came to see you. Not a question." I took a breath. "Yeah, at your job." He said it like he was cataloging something. "During your shift?" "Yes." He looked at me for a long moment. Then he let out a short sound, something between a laugh and a sigh, and he shook his head slightly. "So that's..." He paused. "I want to understand what exactly is happening here, Eli, because from where I'm standing, your straight best friend keeps showing up, keeps texting you, and you keep being available for that in a way you've told me wasn't a big deal. It isn't. What did he want?" His voice was still even, still controlled. Nate was very good at controlled. "What did he come to your work to say?" I looked at him. I had a choice in this moment. I could feel it clearly. The two directions the next sentence could go. I could smooth it over. I had gotten good at that. I could find the version that didn't require me to have a difficult conversation, that kept everything level and calm, that cost me something I hadn't fully identified yet but was starting to feel the shape of. "He said something personal," I said instead. "Something I wasn't expecting." Nate's expression shifted. Still not loud, not explosive. Just tighter. "You know what's interesting?" he said quietly. "The way you're looking right now? That's not how someone looks when their friend said something casual." He tilted his head slightly. "That's how someone looks when they've been waiting for something to happen." The room felt very still. "That's not fair," I said. "No?" He stepped slightly closer, not threatening, just filling the space in a way that felt deliberate. "Be honest with me, Eli. Have you been in love with him this whole time?" The word landed like a physical thing. I felt my jaw tighten. "I'm with you," I said. "That's not an answer. I chose to be here." "That's the answer." He looked at me for a long moment, and then something in his face shifted not to anger exactly, but to something colder than what had been there before. "You know what's embarrassing?" he said, and his voice dropped, almost gentle, the way sharp things can sound gentle right before they cut. "Spending 4 months on someone who's been silently pining over their friend the whole time. That's actually embarrassing, Eli." "For you." Something changed in my chest. Not the familiar collapse, not the quick reach for an apology, not the instinct to make myself smaller so the room could go back to being manageable. Something different, something that felt, in a way I hadn't expected, a lot like clarity. I stood there and let the words land, and instead of dissolving, I just stayed there, upright, present, not yelling, not performing anything, just not folding. Nate noticed. I could see it in the slight recalibration of his expression, the tiny confusion of a man who expected a particular response and didn't receive it. I picked up my bag. "I need some air," I said. "Eli, I'll be back." I said it calmly, the way you say something you mean but aren't fully sure of yet. And I walked out the door and stood in the hallway of his building for a moment, breathing the slightly stale corridor air. And I took out my phone. I called Priya. She picked up on the second ring. "Hey," she said. Then a pause. Because she was Priya, and Priya heard things. "What happened?" "I don't know where to start," I said. "Start anywhere." I leaned against the wall. The corridor was quiet around me, a row of identical doors going down toward the elevator. "I think I need to be honest about some things," I said. "Like, about a lot of things. About what the last few months have actually been." A beat. "Okay," Priya said. Not surprised. Not "I told you so." Just okay. Ready. Present. I closed my eyes briefly and exhaled. I talked for a while in that corridor. About Nate, about Jordan, about the green shirt I'd changed out of and the Thursdays I'd canceled and all the texts I'd read and not answered. All the small surrenders I'd dressed up as something else. Priya listened the way she always listened, without filling the silences, without rushing me to a conclusion, just steady on the other end of the line like something solid. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. "You already know what you need to do," she said finally. "I know," I said. "Then do it." I went back to my own building. Not Nate's mine. I needed to be in my own space, surrounded by my own four walls, the ones that were mine and didn't require anything of me. The elevator opened on the 4th floor and I walked down the hallway and I stopped. Jordan was sitting on the stairs at the end of the corridor, the ones that led up to the 5th floor. The little landing where nobody usually went because the elevator was right there. He was sitting on the 2nd step, jacket off, forearms on his knees. He looked up when he heard my footsteps. Neither of us said anything for a second. I walked over and sat down on the step beside him. The stairwell was dim, a thin strip of light coming from the floor above. It smelled like old concrete and the faint trace of someone's laundry from further up the building. We were close, the stair being narrow, shoulders almost touching. "I'm not great," he said, when the silence had gone on long enough. "Me neither," I said. He nodded slowly. "Then, I shouldn't have come to your work. That was, don't apologize for it." He glanced at me. "I mean it," I said. "Don't." He looked back at the wall across the stairwell. A beat of quiet. "What did Nate say?" he asked. I thought about how to answer that, about all the specific things Nate had said, and all the things underneath them, and all the months of smaller things that I was now seeing in a single accumulated image for the first time. "He asked if I'd been in love with you the whole time," I said. Jordan went still. "Had you?" he asked quietly. I thought about the pizza boxes and the gray hoodie, and the flickering hallway light. I thought about all the years of not looking, all the careful filing away, all the times I'd locked something down because the alternative felt like too much to risk. I thought about the green shirt and the canceled Thursdays and the way I'd stood in Nate's kitchen watching him hold my phone and said nothing, because by then I'd already gotten so good at saying nothing. "I think," I said slowly, "that I spent so long trying not to feel it that I ran straight into someone who made me feel like that was all I deserved." Jordan turned to look at me. I could see the shape of his face in the low stairwell light, the line of his jaw, the careful, open expression of someone waiting. "Eli," he said. "I need time," I said. "Not because I don't," I stopped. Started again. "Because I need to deal with some things first. The right way. Not running from one thing into another." He held my gaze. Then slowly, he nodded. "I'm not going anywhere," he said. We sat there on those stairs for another half hour, not talking much, just existing in the same space, the way we used to before I'd gotten so careful about everything. It felt strange and familiar at once, like a room you've been out of for a long time that still somehow holds the shape of you. When I finally stood to go, my phone buzzed in my pocket. Not one message. Short, "If you walk out again tonight, don't come back." I stood in the stairwell reading it. Jordan didn't ask what it said. I didn't show him. I just stood there with it in my hand. That sentence, and felt something inside me settle, not with sadness, not with the bracing quality of a door slamming, but with something almost like relief, the kind that comes when something you've been dreading finally becomes a decision that makes itself. I looked at the message one more time, and for the first time in 4 months, I didn't reach for the version of myself that would smooth it over. I stood in that stairwell for longer than I needed to. The phone was still in my hand, the message was still on the screen, and I was very aware, in a way that felt new and slightly uncomfortable, that I was not moving, not toward Nate's building, not toward my apartment door, not toward anything, just standing on a concrete landing in a dim stairwell, holding a sentence that had been designed to make me come back, and feeling for the first time in 4 months, like I didn't have to perform a reaction I didn't actually feel. Jordan had already gone upstairs. I'd heard him go, quiet footsteps, no pressure, true to exactly what he'd said. He wasn't going anywhere. He didn't need anything from me tonight. I put the phone in my pocket without answering. Then I went into my apartment, sat down on my couch, and stayed there in the dark for a while, not crying, not spiraling, just being in my own space, in my own quiet, noticing what it felt like to be there without accounting for anyone else. It felt strange, a little empty in a way that I understood was not actually emptiness but just the unfamiliar sensation of room, like a breath you've been holding so long you've forgotten you were holding it, and then you let it out, and your chest feels huge and hollow for a second before it settles into normal. I thought about what Nate had said. Not the sharpest parts, I set those aside, but the structure of it, the way he had, over 4 months, built a version of me that was smaller and quieter and more apologetic, then the version that had sat in a hallway eating cold pizza without knowing anyone's name yet. And the thing that kept catching in my mind wasn't that he had done it. It was that I had helped. Not because I was weak, but because I had come into that relationship already running from something. And when you're already running, you don't always notice when someone starts redirecting your path. I had chosen Nate to get over Jordan. That was the truth I hadn't fully said out loud until this moment. Alone in the dark in my own apartment. And somewhere in trying to make that choice feel worth it, I had let myself become someone I didn't entirely recognize. That was mine. That was my part to own. I texted Nate the next morning. Not a long message. There is a version of this story where I wrote something eloquent. Something that precisely named everything I'd observed over 4 months and articulated it with clarity and fairness. That is not what happened. What happened was a short, honest paragraph that said I didn't think this was working, that I was sorry for not saying so sooner, and that I wished him well and meant it. I reread it twice, changed 2 words, and sent it before I could revise the feeling out of it. He called twice. I let it ring. He texted back something that had edges to it, the kind of message designed to make you doubt the decision you just made, and I read it standing in my kitchen in the morning light, and then I set the phone down and made myself coffee and drank it at the window watching the street wake up. I won't tell you it was easy. Endings don't have to be dramatic to still cost something. Even leaving a situation that wasn't good for you carries a specific weight. This particular kind of grief that isn't about the person so much as about the version of yourself that wanted it to work. I had wanted it to work. I had tried, in my own sideways way, to make it work. And there is something exhausting about finally letting go of the effort, not relief immediately. Just exhaustion first, like putting down something heavy and feeling the ache of having carried it. I called Priya that afternoon. She answered in the middle of what sounded like her lunch. And when I told her I'd ended things with Nate, she got quiet for a second. And then she said, simply, "Good. That's all?" I said, "Just good? What do you want me to say, Eli?" "I don't know. Something." "Okay." I could hear her setting something down. "I think you just did one of the harder things. Not the hardest thing, but a hard thing. And I think you did it for the right reason, which is, because it was true. Not because of Jordan. Not because of anything else. Because it was true." I held on to that. Because she was right. And I needed to hear it stated cleanly, without decoration. Here is what I did not do. I did not go upstairs and knock on Jordan's door that afternoon, or the next day, or the day after that. I know that's not the version of this story where everything unfolds quickly and neatly into something you can wrap a label around. I know there's an expectation, when you've built towards something for this long, that the resolution should arrive fully formed. But I had spent 3 years waiting and 4 months running, and the one thing I had learned, sitting in that stairwell the night before, was that I had never once just stayed with myself, sat still and let things be what they were without pushing them towards some predetermined shape. So I did that. For a little while, I did that. I went back to work. I started answering Priya's texts in real time. I wore the green shirt. I went to the Thursday place with Priya 2 weeks after the breakup, and I sat across from her in that cardamom-smelling coffee shop, and she looked at me for a moment and said, "You look tired in a better way now." I laughed. "You said that before, that I look tired." "I know, this is different." She tilted her head. That time it was the tired of doing something wrong. This is just recovering. I didn't have a smart answer for that. I just nodded and drank my coffee, and let the afternoon be slow and ordinary in a way that felt, honestly, like something I'd been rationing for months without knowing it. The first time I knocked on Jordan's door was a week after everything. Not with a plan, not with a speech. I just found myself standing there on the second floor, landing 1 floor below mine. The door I'd passed 100 times in both directions, and I knocked before I could construct a reason not to. He opened it after a few seconds. He was in a t-shirt and sweatpants, clearly home from work, holding his phone loosely. He looked at me. I looked at him. "Hey," I said. "Hey," he said back. We stood there in the doorway for a second, in the particular awkwardness of 2 people who have both said significant things recently and are now recalibrating what normal looks like. "I broke up with Nate," I said. He nodded slowly, like he'd already suspected, or already heard, though I hadn't told anyone who would have told him. "How are you doing with that?" he asked. "Fine," I said. Then, getting there. He stepped back from the door. A small movement, just slightly, enough to be an invitation without being a demand. You want to come in? I went in. His apartment was familiar in a way that hit me unexpectedly. The same layout as mine, but different in all the accumulated details of someone else's life. The design prints on the wall, the half-finished mug on the coffee table, the low lamp that gave everything a warm tone. I had been in this apartment many times over 3 years, and yet I stood in the middle of it feeling like I was seeing it clearly for the first time. We didn't have a big conversation. That's another thing I want to tell you, because I think these stories always suggest there's a moment where everything gets said in one clean sweep and everyone walks away resolved. We sat on his couch and talked about small things. First, his week, a show I'd been watching, whether the Thai place near the building had gotten worse or whether we'd just gotten more particular. Normal things, the kind of conversation that reestablishes the ground before you walk on it. At some point, he asked how the breakup had actually gone, and I gave him the honest version, shorter than the full story but true. He listened without filling in the blanks before I reached them. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment. "I'm sorry," he said, "that you were dealing with that." "I wasn't dealing with it," I said. "That was the problem." He looked at me sideways. "You're dealing with it now." "Barely. Still counts." We sat with that for a second. The lamp made the room amber-colored, and outside the window the street sounds came in low. A car, someone's music from a passing window, the ordinary evening texture of the city going about its business. "I've been in therapy," Jordan said, out of nowhere. I turned to look at him. "Since about 2 months ago," he said. I needed someone to help me understand some things. About myself." He glanced at me briefly. I don't have a clean answer yet, about what I am, or what label fits, or whatever, but I'm figuring it out." "You don't need a clean answer," I said. "I know." He exhaled. "It's still weird not having one." "Yeah," I said. "I know." He looked at me. That same open expression from the coffee shop, but quieter now, less weighted by the urgency of needing to finally say something. Just present. "I'm not asking you to wait for me to figure it out," he said carefully. "That's not what this is." "I know that too," I said. He stopped. "Tried again. I want to do this right. Whatever this is. I don't want to do it in a way where we're both running from something and we happen to collide. I want it to be actual," I said. He looked at me. "Yeah, actual." Something settled in the room between us. Not romantic exactly. Not a scene, just an agreement. The kind that doesn't need ceremony. "Okay," I said. "Okay?" "Yeah." I held his gaze. "Let's be actual." He laughed. Soft, genuine. The whole-body version that I'd always liked and didn't have to pretend not to like anymore. The weeks after that were not a love story. Not yet. They were something more honest than that, the careful, unglamorous process of two people rebuilding something real. We had coffee on Saturday mornings. We walked sometimes in the evenings with no destination in particular. We talked, and I mean actually talked. The kind of conversation where you say the thing you actually think instead of the polished version, and sometimes it was uncomfortable and sometimes it was easy, and both of those were fine. Jordan was still figuring things out. Some days he was lighter than I'd ever seen him. Some days he was quiet in a way that I recognized the internal reckoning of someone dismantling something they'd built over years. I didn't try to rush any of it. I knew what that process looked like from the inside. And the most useful thing you can do for someone who's doing it is just stay present, without turning your presence into pressure. And I was doing my own work. That mattered to me, that I wasn't just transferring my focus from one person to another without looking at myself honestly first. I started seeing a therapist, a woman named Dr. Reyes, who had a very direct manner and an uncanny ability to ask the exact question I most wanted to avoid. In our third session, she asked me what I thought I'd been afraid of, underneath all of it, and I said something about rejection, about Jordan not feeling the same way, and she let me finish and then said, "And what were you afraid of before you even got to him?" I sat with that question for a long time. The answer, when I finally found it, was this. I had been afraid that if I looked too directly at what I wanted, and reached for it, and got it wrong, the wanting itself would feel shameful. Not just the outcome, the wanting. I had spent years before Jordan learning to contain what I felt because the world had not always made it safe to feel it openly. And somewhere in that process of containing, I had started to believe that desire itself was a liability, that the wanting was the problem, not the circumstances. Nate had confirmed that fear in ways he probably didn't even realize. Every time I'd made myself smaller, every time I'd swapped the green shirt for the blue one, Every time I'd put the phone down without answering, I was running the same old program, protecting myself from my own wanting by making it invisible. The shift, the real one, wasn't the night I didn't answer Nate's text. It was recognizing that I was allowed to want things, fully, without building a case for it first. One morning, about 6 weeks after everything, I came downstairs to check my mail and ran into Jordan in the lobby. He'd just come back from a run, hair damp, slightly out of breath. He saw me and immediately held up a hand. "Don't say anything," he said. I raised an eyebrow. "I know I look terrible." "I wasn't going to say that. You were thinking it." "I was thinking you look like someone who voluntarily ran at 7 in the morning, which I personally find baffling." He laughed, slightly winded, and leaned against the mailboxes to catch his breath. Then he said, without any particular lead-up, "You want to get coffee?" I looked at him, at his running shoes and his damp hair and the easy, unguarded way he was asking. "I need to shower first," he said. Like, immediately. "But after?" "Yeah," I said. "After." He smiled. Not performed, not strategic, just real. The full version. The one I'd been watching for 3 years from a careful, managed distance. I went back upstairs. "I want to tell you something now. If you've stayed with me this long, and thank you, genuinely, for staying. I used to think the hardest part of being in love with someone who didn't know they were queer was the waiting. All those years of sitting on the feeling and filing it away and watching from a distance. That was hard, but it wasn't the hardest part. The hardest part was that I'd been so afraid of all of it, the wanting, the waiting, the possibility of it going wrong, that I'd run in the completely wrong direction, straight toward someone who recognized that fear and knew how to use it. Not because I was stupid. Because fear makes very convincing arguments. Fear dresses up in the language of maturity, moving on, healthy choices, fresh starts, and sometimes you have to be standing in a dim stairwell at 11 o'clock at night, holding a threat disguised as a text message, before you can finally hear how hollow all those arguments actually were. If you're in something right now where you keep showing up as a smaller version of yourself, keep canceling on the people who actually know you, keep changing the shirt, keep putting the phone down without answering. I just want you to sit with that for a second, not to judge it. I did every one of those things. But to ask yourself honestly, is this what choosing someone is supposed to feel like? Because in my experience, and I know my experience is just mine, take it for what it's worth, real choosing doesn't feel like shrinking. It feels like the person you're with makes the room bigger, not smaller. It feels like you can wear the green shirt and send the text and laugh loudly in the kitchen, and be exactly the size you actually are. And none of it is too much. That's what I was looking for. I just took a very circuitous route to understand it. If any of this hit close to something you're carrying, leave it in the comments. Not because I have answers, I very much do not, but because there's something about saying it in a space where someone will read it that takes a little of the weight off. I mean that. I read everything, and if you're new here, stick around. I promise not all of it is this heavy. Some of it is considerably more chaotic. I saw Jordan this morning. He knocked on my door around 8, holding 2 coffees, one in each hand, and he passed me mine without asking how I took it. Black, no sugar, exactly right. He'd known for 3 years. I'd known that he'd known and never let it mean what it meant. We stood in my doorway with our coffees while the building stirred to life around us. Elevator sounds, someone's radio 2 floors up, the low traffic noise coming through the window at the end of the hall. "You have work today?" he asked. "Not until noon," I said. "You?" 9. He leaned against the doorframe. "I have 40 minutes. "Okay," I said. So we stayed there. 40 minutes. Talking about nothing important and somehow everything important. The way it had always been with him when I wasn't trying to manage it. At some point I looked at him at the morning light coming in sideways through the hall window, at the easy way he was standing, at the small smile that appeared when he caught me looking, and I thought about the flickering hallway light on the first night, and the pizza, and the gray hoodie, and all the years of careful not looking, and all the months of running, and all the small surrenders I'd dressed up as choices, and I thought, here, this, not perfect, not fully labeled, not arrived at cleanly, but true. The truest thing I'd had in longer than I wanted to admit. Sometimes that's what it looks like when something's actually real. Not a moment, just a doorway, and 2 coffees, and someone who knew how you took yours without ever having to ask.